Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Jade with 8 Flags Chiropractic. We are closing out the 10-day Healthy Inflammatory Response Program from Standard Process. The end is near. All right, so congratulations. You guys made it through week 1. There's only a few more days to go. Maybe a few of you started a little bit later than the rest of us that started on Monday last week, but that's totally fine. So we'll get you guys scheduled for your in-body scans. If you did participate in that prior to starting the cleanse, we definitely want to take a look at those scores and compare them. All right, so physiological. What are these changes that have happened in your body? So basically, the most important thing is that your body's trying to go back to homeostasis. We want the blood glucose levels to be between 70 to 110, and that's in the typical lab work results that you want to see it between that range levels there. But in terms of functional health, the more optimal level, we want it to be under 90. So if you're a client of mine, I'm going to be taking a look at your blood work. We'll see what your glucose levels are. I want to see that either 89 or lower. So we definitely are looking at that. And anything that's 90 and up is definitely a pro-inflammatory and is potentially cancer causing. So you want to be very careful about those numbers. And it's definitely an intricate balance between stored sugar and free sugar. So that's exactly what this homeostasis is right in here. We've got our blood glucose levels. The stimulus is that the blood glucose levels rise because we've eaten something that's sweet. So then the pancreas releases the insulin, which then pushes the glucose to be stored into your fat or into your liver. And then it comes back around. All right, so we've got some homeostasis. This is keeping our blood glucose levels within this range here. And now we come to another stimulus where our sugar levels fall. So we're in a demand for more energy, for more sugar. That pancreas is going to release glucagon, which is going to pull the glucose out of its stored state and bring it back into the blood so that we can utilize it for energy. So this is this very intricate balance between having the right amount of blood in your blood or the right amount of glucose in your bloodstream, and making sure that we're not having too much that the body is overwhelmed and just has to push everything into adipose tissue. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. All right, so inflammation and the role it plays on your health. We're going to be taking a look at the whole foods and herbal solutions here. We'll be talking about some of the other methods of treatment as well. But of course, as a chiropractor, as a functional health coach, we're definitely going to be focusing on whole foods and herbal solutions. It's a system designed to help us, but sometimes the immune system can go awry. So we want to make sure that we are taking care of that as best as possible. All right, so this is from the CDC. There's new evidence out there that indicates that uncontrolled inflammation is a prominent component of many common diseases. And these are all of these diseases listed over here in red. We've got arthritis, periodontal disease, inflammatory bowel disease, cardiovascular disease, asthma, cancer, metabolic syndromes, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases. And there's a wide spread of different kinds of autoimmune diseases. So you guys may recognize this image here while I slide this box out of the way. This was used in our first class that we had last week. It talks about how these are all the diseases of aging, and we're talking about the epidemic proportions that are in existence now. So what we're focusing on here is that there's an elevated level of, or at least it's either elevated or it's present, because sometimes if something's present, that's not a good sign. So what we're looking at is that peripheral blood markers of inflammation are either present and elevated. There's aging and there's pro-inflammatory nutrition. So the uncontrolled inflammation that we've had in the US has cost us hundreds of $millions in health expenses. And it's unsurmountable in comparison to how this one thing, inflammation, leads to all these other diseases. That's how it costs us hundreds of millions of dollars. All right, so let's talk about how the body senses pain, how it sends the signal to the brain, and we'll try not to be overwhelming with all this information here, but just to geek out for a moment, we've got an injury that occurs, and therefore inflammation happens to the area to either repair it or protect it or both. And when there's inflammation in the area, those nerve endings are going to pick up the signal, and it's going to send it through that dorsal root ganglion. It says DRG there. That is a sensory nerve root, and that is going to bring us to the spinal cord or the central nervous system. That is where it connects with another synapses with another nerve that's going to then bring that message up to the brain and sends it up as pain, processes it as pain. So um, certain things, and then when we process that, then the signal is then sent off to another part of the brain, which then tells your body to move in reaction, whether that be shaking your hand or taking it off of a stove if you put it on a really hot burning stove. um, some things to think about there. All right, so here is the inflammatory process. So we've talked about how these different things can play a role in the inflammatory process, your environment, which is going to be your allergens, your toxins, your stress that you experience when you go to work, that kind of thing, or maybe when you go home. Any kind of trauma or lowered oxygen levels, drugs and alcohol, those are all environmental factors. Then for our genes, you've got your polymorphisms that are maybe rendered differently between different individuals, or something that you may be more susceptible to having because you have these specific genes. I always like the saying that um, it's a lifestyle, right, that pulls the trigger, not genes. It's just going to load the gun. So you're in control of what's going to happen when you pull that trigger. All right, so we've got our diet. That's a big part of it. And obviously, we've been working on that this past week. So we've got your macronutrients, your micronutrients. Your macronutrients are your carbs, your fat, your proteins. Your micronutrients are when we're talking about magnesium, calcium, potassium, sodium, making sure that all of those things are balanced throughout the body, inside the cell and outside the cell. Any kind of accessory nutrients and phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are from plants, and there is a lot of research coming out on how beneficial phytonutrients are, especially when it comes to fighting inflammation. All right, and then function. So function then shifts physiological state into alarm reaction characterized by the inflammatory process, which then turns into itis. These are the symptoms of inflammation. Anything itis is inflamed. So the roots of chronic inflammation, this can have, you can have some genetic susceptibility to triggers, like we mentioned before. There could be an overabundance of inflammatory precursors. So we want to be careful about things that we're putting into our body that might create a state of a heightened sensitivity towards inflammation. We also have a lack of antioxidant phytochemicals. So we're not getting enough of those phytonutrients that we need. Insufficient dampening of excessive upregulation by endogenous mediators, and then a malfunctioning off switch. So basically, the body isn't able to turn off the system that's sending out the signal. So it just keeps sending out the signal, and you're chronically in that state of inflammation. So there's a lot of different places where there can be a mistake in your body, a lot of different systems that play into managing inflammation. I always like to say that your body's like an orchestra, and you can have one instrument be out of tune, and that could mess up the entire orchestra, the sound of the orchestra, the quality that they're trying to create. So you want to make sure that everything's all tuned up and working the way that it should be. Okay, so let's get into this. We'll try not to be overwhelming here, but I do want to mention this NFKB because we're going to be bringing this up in the future. So this is a nuclear factor kappa B. It's triggered by all of those things that are listed up there: the oxidative stress, viruses, physical stress, growth factors, bacteria, DNA damage. All of those things are those stressors that we experience whether they're physical, chemical, or emotional. If many of you recognize that right there as a chiropractic patient, we do talk about that in our office. But all of those things are going to stimulate or activate that NFKB. So, what it does is then it activates and releases and engages all of those things that come down from there. So, it's a very important part of getting the inflammatory response moving, getting it started. So it's then going to release your immune receptors, your growth factors, going to release your cytokines and your chemokines. That's what's going to be pulling in all those other cells to be able to repair and protect. And it also releases antioxidants and stress response genes. So it's trying to help diminish the damage that comes with the stress of repairing those tissues. All right, so these causes of chronic inflammation, take a look at this list. We've got obesity and visceral fat. This is the very first one up here that I wanted to make sure that we mentioned, that we highlighted, because we do take a look at that on your in-body scan. If you all remember on last Saturday, or if you did it a little bit before then, we did take a look at that number. We want to see that number under 10. So, and consistently around 4 or 5 if you can do that. But quite a few of us maybe above 10, maybe just a little bit, maybe a little more. So that's the goal, is to hit that 10 mark. Once we do that, then maybe we can give you little tweaks to make to get you down to that 4 or 5 for your visceral fat. But you've also got all these other things that are causes of chronic inflammation. You got insulin resistance, which is a big part of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, food sensitivities, which you're hearing more and more and more about, all these home testing kits that you can do for food sensitivities. If you eat something that your body is noticing as an invader, an intruder, that's going to trigger the inflammatory response in a negative way, and your body's going to start attacking that or itself, even though it's not something that should be bad. We've got oxidative stress and chronic microbial infection, nutrient deficit or nutrient deficiency, nutrient excess. So you could have one or the other. I do have some clients that I've worked with that we've looked over their blood work on their first time that they've come in, and a certain micronutrient is extremely elevated out of all of these other micronutrients. And I find out through questioning that the patient has been taking that specific micronutrient, whether it be calcium or magnesium or iron. Iron and magnesium are two of the bigger ones that we do see here. But their body has an excessive amount of it because they've been taking it for so long. They're ready to be done. They don't need to be taking it that much anymore. They've replenished their body. So it's important when a physician prescribes you something like that, a micronutrient, that you do pay attention to how long you've been taking it for, and reassess to see where your blood levels are at with that micronutrient at that time. If you're still struggling with it, then maybe there's an absorbing issue. But that's something that we can help you with for sure. So yes, of course, arthritis and dysbiosis. So dysbiosis is that gut dysfunction, gut microbial dysfunction or imbalance, so that your immune system can function. If you remember from the last class, 70% of your immune system relies or rests in your gut. All right, so this is an interesting picture to take a look at. I'm glad that it came out so large because we can connect all of these dots. This is basically showing us how all of these diseases are connected, how they're related. These are, comorbidities. There's certain pathologies that feed into each other. So let's take a look at, for example, we've got inflammatory bowel disease right down here, this pink one. We want to take a look at all the lines that match that pink color. So we're going to follow this one up, ankylosing spondylitis. Now that is something that appears in the spine and in the skeletal system, which is more so related or close in proximity. It's adjacent to your GI system. So that's kind of an interesting connection there, among other things chemically that are involved with, with chronic inflammation. Then we've got this connection to chronic fatigue syndrome from inflammatory bowel disease. Chronic fatigue syndrome, that's a little bit more like your brain, right? Your nervous system. So there's that gut-brain connection between inflammatory bowel disease and chronic fatigue disease. Now, I could sit here all day and break this apart. I find this image so interesting, but I'm pretty sure it's just going to bore you guys with that one. Okay, so here we have how this can become chronic rather than going into the resolution phase of the inflammatory response. So basically, we've got, as you see in the picture here, we've got your injury, we've got the invaders of the organisms, an infection. So we have then the release of those chemical mediators to protect. We've got acute inflammation, which comes from that. And then you see all these different arrows. What we hope is the blue. With that, we've got the release of the neutrophils, macrophages if they're needed, and we're able to break down all of the bacteria and the invaders that are coming in through that site of injury. And we've eventually bring ourselves over to the resolution. You see these resolvens and SPM, these are specific parts of your chemistry that are going to help us create that resolution there. But when things don't really go the way they're supposed to, we get chronic inflammation, which turns out to be periodontal disease, rheumatoid arthritis. That's when those things kind of start to come out. And usually, that could be presented in an abscess formation. There's usually a lot of scarring or organ fibrosis, and you can usually see that with diabetes, cardiovascular disease, asthma as examples. And just to kind of tie in this part here, it goes with what acute inflammation actually looks like. All right, and here are those cardinal signs. I just like this image, it's pretty cute. You got your heat, your redness that's making heat hot. You've got your swelling, look at that belly, some pain, stubbed his toe, and then loss of function. See how he's falling apart? That's usually the last one to present itself. Okay, so this kind of takes that and shows you how it's working with the injury and how that or what that specific feeling actually means inside of your body, which is pretty interesting. So at the very top here, you've got your tissue injury, and then we've got capillary widening. If you look at that first arrow down, which increases blood flow, which creates heat. So that's why you feel heat. You're getting more blood flow to the area to bring more cells to the area. Now, how about increased permeability? That means that if you can see here in the picture with my little mouse, there's a little space here between these endothelial cells, and that allows for these cells to then come through. So increased permeability, which means fluid releases into the tissues, which then creates more redness and swelling. And tenderness, of course. So then we've also got the attraction of leukocytes. So these are going to create an extravasation of leukocytes to the site of the injury, which again is going to create more swelling and redness and also some tenderness and pain. And then there's a systemic response, which is where that thymus we talked about before, the thymus is going to send out that blast and it's going to create a fever and also more of a proliferation of leukocytes to the area to help break that stuff down. Okay, so with this, we just want to take a look at how those certain white blood cells are coming out to help us in the order in which they do that. So what we've got is this two phases of resolution. We've got initially the edema, the swelling that happens with the increased permeability and the dilation of those blood vessels. We're going to get more edema in the area. Then we've got your neutrophils. Those are the first guys out there. And if we need them, we call on the monocytes and macrophages, or they come to assist a little bit. But those guys are going to be there more for the long-term issues. So one reason that we use this or that we need this information is we want to know how long somebody's been dealing with a certain problem. It can kind of tell us if it's more of a chronic infection or if it's more of an acute infection. If there's an elevated amount of neutrophils but not as many monocytes, macrophages, then it's probably going to be more of an acute issue, something that happened in the past week. Whereas if you have elevated macrophages and monocytes, and neutrophils are maybe a little bit elevated, but not as much, then you want to think that maybe there's something that's been going on for a little bit longer. It's been going on for maybe too long. So that's the importance of that. Again, some more geeky stuff, but we saw the word Resolvens earlier. I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that. That's the metabolic byparts of omega-3 fatty acids. That's why we want to well, there's many reasons why, but that's one of the many reasons why we want to be taking our omega-3 fatty acids. Those Resolvens are going to go in and interact with our system cell receptors, and they're going to help in the pathway of resolution of inflammation, along with our SPM. Okay, so we've got a few things here that I'm sure a lot of you have already known about to help with inflammation, some natural remedies, herbs, and things like that. But even if you eat well, it's difficult to provide your body the nutrients it needs because our foods are not as nutrient dense as they were 50 to 100 years ago. And can you believe that 50 years ago was only 1970 or 1971? 100 years ago was 1921. That doesn't seem like that long ago, but time is time. Okay, so you can be proactive rather than reactive. And we talk about that also a lot in our practice here. We want to be more proactive than reactive. If we can stay out of pain, then we want to stay out of pain and make sure that our body is functioning so that our performance is always optimal, that we're doing the best that we can at whatever job we do, whether that be working as a nurse in a hospital, helping people with finding the right insurance, or even taking care of your family. If that's what you do, you don't want to be stuck on the couch because you're in pain. You want to be able to do everything you need to support them. So, some of the ways that we do this, you can always take these forms of herbal support and regular supplemental, whole food supplemental support to continue to support your inflammatory response system. So turmeric is a really good option. We've used that during this cleanse here, turmeric forte. And again, that's a really great turmeric to be taking because it combines with that fenugreek, which makes it much more absorbent. Your body's able to absorb it a lot easier, makes it more readily absorbable. So bromelain is actually a part of pineapple. It's a really tasty fruit with a really good benefit there for fighting inflammation. You've got your polyphenols, which are seen in fruits and vegetables. And you got black currant seed oil, which is also what we're taking during this program, your omega-3 fatty acids. And then you've also got your EGCGs, which is found in green tea. So green tea, a cup a day, is going to be wonderful for helping to fight inflammation. You've got ginger, and then your essential fatty acids to kind of go along with that black currant seed oil, as well as your SPMs, which are special pain modifiers. And those come from those essential fatty acids. Oh, one thing I do want to talk about with you guys and mentioning being proactive rather than reactive is that we've created these 30-day wellness monthly protocols that we have one actually that's meant to be for healthy aging, talking about diseases of aging. And it's specifically going to target some of these things that we're talking about here. It's only 3 supplements. I didn't want to be overwhelming. This is a wellness protocol, of course. But one of those is going to be OPC Synergy, which is an antioxidant, a very powerful antioxidant. Another one is going to be the cod liver oil, or you can maybe change that out with the black currant seed oil, but I'm a big fan of the cod liver oil, especially for those that are 50, 60 and up. And then, of course, Simplex F or Simplex M, which is going to be dependent upon your gender, obviously, but that's going to be your hormonal support, not only targeting specific sex hormones, but it's going to be supporting your thyroid and supporting your pancreas and those kinds of things, your adrenals. Very important as we age to make sure that your hormones are functioning at a high level. So, oxflammation. I'm wondering how many of you have actually heard of oxflammation before, something that I learned for the first time in chiropractic school. But oxflammation, if you look at the bottom, that last bullet there, it is chronic oxidative stress that has also turned into inflammation. So oxflammation. So what this is a pre-pathological condition. basically, your body needs to have this in order for all of these other diseases, especially metabolic diseases that we've been talking about, to exist. So it's caused by this vicious cycle of chronic and systemic oxidative stress. Systemic oxidative stress. So we're not talking about solely the same knee getting hurt over and over again. We're talking about putting chemicals in the body that are continuing to flare up your cells all over. So very different systemic oxidative stress. So it turns into mild subclinical inflammation. Something that, maybe when you wake up in the morning, you're feeling really stiff or you're achy, your feet, you step down on the ground out off the bed and your feet are kind of stiff and crunchy. Those kinds of things. That's the mild subclinical inflammation. If you went to the doctor, they'd say, ah, it's just getting old. That's old age. I do not like that three-letter word. No OLD in this office. So, what it is the presence of this long term means that there's going to be a loss of body's ability to respond to the signals. It's just like if your little brother was sitting next to you, poking you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. After a while, I mean, it gets really annoying. You might do something about it before you get used to it. But if somebody was sitting there poking you after a while, you might become numb to it. Maybe another example is the clothing that's on your body right now. When you put it on this morning or at any point throughout the day, you noticed it at first. Maybe it was a little chilly. Maybe it was nice and soft and warm. But after a couple of minutes, you get used to the feeling of it on your skin and you almost forget that it's even there. So it becomes muffled. And that's the same thing that happens with these inflammation signals. They become muffled, or it's just not as important, like the boy who cried wolf. So it just reinforces the state of chronic inflammation. Okay, so inflammation as a common feature of dysfunction and disease. So we've talked about the whole process. This kind of shows you where the NFKB comes into place. I'll show you right there. It's an activation of pro-inflammatory transcription factors. This kind of sends the signals out, right? That tell the cytokines to go out, the chemokines, all of that stuff. And what that does is it increased expression of all of these things, like I just mentioned. And therefore we get all of these things. More blood flow to the area, which means more white blood cells that can go into the area, all of that stuff. And as we come over here, you hope that you just bop right on over. Well, these come down to these reactive oxygen nitrogen species. They're going to come right on up to here to be eliminated. And then we got the resolution of inflammation. But sometimes we can get stuck. So if we get down into here, and there's dysfunction of the feedback regulation, because if it's a food sensitivity, you keep eating the same food, then it's getting dysregulated. Your body's not able to get out of that cycle. You've got chronic degenerative diseases, and then that can turn into other chronic persistence of the stimulus at subclinical level can then become these more inherited diseases. Like I said, genes may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. So if what we're doing over here, you've got these bullets loaded in your magazine in your gun, but it's what you're doing that's going to actually pull the trigger. So if you get stuck in that, you keep feeding yourself that inflammation, then it's going to eventually highlight those genes that are going to focus on or highlight those specific diseases. You want to be very careful about that. You just end up going back through this loop: dysfunction of feedback regulation, chronic persistence of inflammation and stimulus, dysregulation, dysfunction, chronic stimulus. So you just get stuck in that loop. Okay, so here's how this impacts in non-hereditable metabolic diseases. So this is type 2 diabetes in particular. And the image over here is very interesting. More than 1 in every 10 adults has diabetes. And it may be interesting to know whether or not somebody actually knows that they have diabetes or not. Many people don't go to the doctor, so they don't get blood work and they have no idea. They may be feeling fine now, or a lot of times people are just outside of their own body and they have no idea that their body's in this state of inflammation, subclinical, mild inflammation. So being aware of your body, which is something that you learn through this cleanse by taking these things away. Oh, this is what it feels like to not have inflammation in the body. Um, a lot of people don't know what that feels like. So 90 to 95% of people with diabetes have type 2. So type 2 is much more common. Exercise and weight loss reduce the risk of prediabetes, becoming type 2 diabetes by 58%. That's a lot. So exercise and weight loss. Weight loss. I don't really like that idea to be focused on that. I would say exercise and proper nutrition because weight loss is a side effect of both exercise and proper nutrition. And over 25% of adults over 65 have diabetes. So that's a good amount. That's definitely something that we need to be paying attention to. So obesity and obesity associated metabolic syndrome have a significant inflammatory component. We eat so much sugar that the pancreas, when we talk about obesity associated inflammation, it's, let's see, promoted by or induced by insulin resistance. Let me repeat that. Chronic inflammation can promote obesity associated diabetes by inducing insulin resistance. So, what that means is that we eat so much sugar that the pancreas can't push the glucose into the cells like it should, and then the insulin isn't doing its job anymore. So that's where the doctors are then prescribe certain drugs like metformin to help the body manage the glucose, the blood sugar levels, because the body's own hormones aren't able to do it anymore. So 99% of type 2 diabetes is caused by us, which means we can fix it. You are responsible or for creating it, then you can be responsible for fixing it. And then, of course, these pathways initiate and sustain, or obesity associated inflammation is triggered by excess nutrients like sugar or refined carbs. And these things are going to activate the metabolic signaling pathways. So, excess amounts of sugar and refined carbs are going to highlight the inflammatory response. And these pathways initiate and sustain that inflammation. And eventually it affects the immune cell infiltration and polarization towards adipose tissue, which means that basically your body is fighting against its own adipose tissue. That could be definitely painful. All right. So here's how these diseases kind of all play into each other and how they eventually can kind of lead one into the other. So we've got diabetes mellitus 2, which is type 2 diabetes. We've got hyperglycemia, which promotes oxidative stress. We get long-term oxidative stress. Then we get oxflammation. We get tissue damage, which contributes to these typical complications that you get like polyneuropathy, retinopathy, and atherosclerosis. So polyneuropathy is when you got many nerves that aren't working right. Retinopathy is when your nerves in your eyes are not working right. And atherosclerosis is, of course, everybody knows what atherosclerosis is, but the lovely plaquing and damage to those linings in your blood vessels. So you can see how somebody may start with type 2 diabetes. Now we're going to jump down to the next level. We've got the oxidative LDLs, which are much more stressful, like oxidative stress. Think oxidative stress. They're much more stressful on the endothelial cells, so it promotes more dysfunction and death, which also leads to more atherosclerosis. Big part of cardiovascular disease. And this is done by activating the NFKB and AP1 pathways. So we talked about that earlier as well, that NFKB is the one that participates with others to activate that inflammatory response. So we see how we've got type 2 leading into cardiovascular disease. Now we've got Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's is much more of that systemic inflammation, chronic oxidative stress, and metabolic diseases are not risk factors of this disease, but they coexist and drive neurodegeneration. So Alzheimer's is neurodegeneration. These systemic diseases eventually are going to eat away at the nerves and the fat that surrounds the nerves and protects the nerves, so that you will start to notice some mental deterioration or any kind of neurological deterioration as we noted more acutely in type 2 diabetes above with the polyneuropathy. So what do these things have in common? Well, elevated CRP. That's a big one. So CRP is very nonspecific. It's seen in lab results when you run blood work. It's most clinically and epidemiologically validated marker of systemic inflammation, but it doesn't tell you where it's coming from, why you have it, or anything. It just says you're inflamed. Your whole body is inflamed. So let's take a look at the next slide. 4 ways to lower your C-reactive protein. Eat an alkaline for life diet. So a lot of the foods that we've been eating throughout this program, you can continue to focus on those. You can eliminate foods that encourage inflammation, something else that we've been doing for the past week here. Exercise. I hope you guys have been working towards getting 10,000 steps a day, like we talked about. And then rest. Rest is so important. And we need to make sure that we're sleeping enough so that your body can heal. So something else that you can do, of course, is increase your high antioxidant foods. Your dark chocolate, yum. Make sure that it's the right kind of dark chocolate, that it's not sweetened with anything that's inflammatory promoting. You've got your pecans, blueberries, strawberries, all the berries, your raspberries over there too. And of course, your vegetables like red cabbage, kale, beets, and spinach. That sounds so good. I'm hungry. Okay, so summary. In short, inflammation is good for you as long as you complete the cycle. You've got to be able to come to that resolution state, back to homeostasis. So a body in balance. When the body is in balance, the resolution phase resolves, the inflammatory cascade then brings the body back to homeostasis. I love that image. Very fun. Okay, so chronic inflammation is bad for you. If you couldn't tell by this whole presentation, when the resolution phase is inadequate, inflammation becomes chronic, triggering oxidative stress. So oxidative stress and chronic inflammation usually lead to the pathology of nearly all disease states. We've listed a few different diseases throughout this program, so you can take a look at that. And of course, something to think about is that Western medicine goals are to block the initiation phase. It's kind of interesting. Let's take a look at that. So what are they blocking? Pain. Let's talk painkillers. So there's 3 phases of experiencing pain. You've got nociception, pain perception, and then the consequences of pain, like being grumpy. You see grumpy cat over there. So nociception, what is it? Nociception or nociceptors are the sensory neurons that alert the brain and the body that there's potentially damaging stimuli. We'll go into a little bit more detail about that in just a moment. So what we have with that is opioids. That's one of the major forms of treating pain, right? Our painkillers. These are overprescribed and misused, and it's led to a huge public health crisis in the US. There are many documentaries online that you can watch that kind of go into the details of how this has just grown over time to what it is now. And in fact, because it's become so prevalent, I believe that there's been at least a plateau, not continuing to progress, but it doesn't seem to be as big of a highlight now that COVID has kind of taken over the past year and a half. So immune cells naturally produce opiates. Did you know that? Your body has its own natural opiates. And these act on opioid receptors in the body. So opioid painkillers can prevent the nociceptor activity, providing pain relief. So it doesn't really help with that. And opioid painkillers can also be highly addictive, very highly addictive. That is definitely something that a lot of my patients talk about when they come into the office. And something else to kind of think about. We've talked about pain, fire, inflammation, all of that. Your house is on fire. So what do? You call 911. You get the fire department. They're coming to your house. The firemen arrive. What do you want them to do? Do you want them to smash your fire alarm, or do you want them to put the fire out and then maybe come back the next day and find out, why was there a fire? Where did it come from? Who started it? I think we would all probably go for B. And Nsaids. Here are a few examples over here. NSAIDs usually target or inhibit the COX-1 and COX-2 pain pathways. So this reduces the formation of prostaglandins, which is what also signals for the cells to come to the area. So you're kind of shutting off your body's ability to just start the whole process. And it prevents pain sensitization. So, long term side effects, of course, are ulcer formation and serious GI problems. I'm sure many of you have heard about peptic ulcers that can form from taking NSAIDs long term. You can also have renal failure because your body's trying to filter out all of that. And then you can also lead to stroke or heart attack because of how it affects your blood vessels and the integrity of everything like that. So here's the side effects of NSAIDs. Look at that list. I had to make the print smaller to make it all fit, and it's alphabetical, but there's quite a list of side effects that come with it. You've got bloating, acid or sour stomach, abdominal pain. So that's some abdominal stuff there. Diarrhea, of course. I've definitely heard of that. Other things to be thinking about are heartburn and digestion. Those are more of the beginnings of what it would be like to feel those deeper peptic ulcer, eventually turning into a peptic ulcer. Lots of GI issues, passing gas, nausea, some other issues with breathing, shortness of breath, trouble breathing, fun stuff, and pain perception. So the experience of feeling pain or the detection of the painful stimuli is controlled by those pain receptors. So, and some people have a higher tolerance of pain. So you want to make sure that, I notice this when I'm examining my patients. If I'm performing an orthopedic test, some people don't respond as severely to some tests, whereas others, they're in a great, immense amount of pain, and they express that in the appointment. And we move on from there and make sure that they leave in a better state. But these are the different ways of managing pain. NSAIDs, opioids, corticosteroids, antihistamines, things that we didn't really talk about too much today, but that's totally fine. And what they do is they alter your body signaling system. So there's a reason that we're born with the ability to sense pain, and it's in some instances medication can be helpful, but not always. And at a chronic, I'm taking these pain medications for the past couple of years, that's a little excessive. So a lot of this is like putting a black piece of tape on top of the check engine light. And I don't think that that's very wise to be blocking that signal there when your car could fall apart on you in the middle of nowhere and you're stuck. Hopefully your body doesn't do that to you. So what are these natural defenses that you're blocking? We've got, or the opioids that your body is able to create its own painkiller in a sense. So these are these natural defense systems, the endocannabinoid system. So you've got endocannabinoid, your phytocannabinoid, and your synthetic cannabinoid. So endocannabinoid is brain derived. That's what we create inside of our body. Phytocannabinoid is what we actually pull from the plants, buds, tinctures, extracts. Oh, and the endocannabinoids, that comes from food, your omega-3s. Lovely, blackcurrant seed oil. And then the synthetic cannabinoids are made in the lab, and typically THC only. So all of those are going to play on endocannabinoid receptors. Now, there's two main types of receptors. They're always researching more and learning more about this, so it's continuing to grow. But these phytocannabinoids inhibit nociceptors and pain sensitization. And there's those two types, like I mentioned, your CB1, which is expressed on neuronal cells. So we're talking about the nerves actually sensing pain and sending signals. And then CB2 is expressed on your immune cells. So we're talking about specifically the thymus gland. So it's going to go straight there and help manage your T cells and stuff like that. Something that you can think about is that, this wasn't discovered until really like the mid 1970s. So this is all really new research. But there's so much interesting information out there about how hemp and CBD and THC can be beneficial for you medically. Um, Standard Process takes advantage of this through their hemp oil. And then they also have a liquid hemp complex that I'm aware of, but we keep the hemp oil in the office here. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that, don't be afraid to ask. So here we are here. We got your CB2 cannabinoid receptor, which is in the thymus gland. And then you've got the CB1 cannabinoid receptor, which is in the brain. So medical marijuana and CBD will only really affect the CB1 receptor in the brain. However, hemp, the entire plant, it's the entire plant with minimal THC. You're talking about the stem of the plant, the leaves of the plant. Those are going to bind to that CB2 receptor in your thymus, in one of your major immune gland. And of course, there's no psychoactive effects with the hemp oil. So here's a picture that kind of shows you where all these different receptors are located. You've got for your CB1 receptors, your brain, your lungs, your vascular system. The liver is both CB1 and CB2, which is kind of interesting, and so is the pancreas. And there's a reason for that, I feel. Your colon is CB2. Your immune system looks like it's CB2. And your bones are CB2. Your muscles are CB1. Reproductive organs are CB1. Your pancreas is CB1 and CB2, like we mentioned. But look at this one down here, the CB3. We've got these areas of trauma. So the areas of trauma may be associated to when somebody gets an injury. So he's kind of just pointing to the general body here. That's brown is the whole outline of the body. But whenever there's an injury like a broken bone or something like that, then these CB3 receptors are highlighted and can receive a stimulus that way. So, is your bucket overflowing? Toxins, trauma, infection. So, inflammation is overflowing, and these are the ways that you will see it, the many faces of inflammation. You got your high blood pressure, digestive problems, weight loss, dizziness, fatigue, headaches, hormonal dysregulation, muscle and joint pain. I mean, I can tell you how many times I hear this all day long for patients laying on the table about all these aches and pains. And we always have that conversation about inflammation and bringing it down a little bit. So, what can I do for myself? Here are some modifiable risk factors for inflammation. Where you live is one. Are you running around in a cornfield that's been sprayed with pesticides? Are you in a house, that's got mold in the walls and things like that, where you have issues with mold and mildew? Those are things that are going to definitely play a role in inflammation. Your age, of course, wear and tear is going to be a part of that. And the aging process just has its own natural oxidative stress factors. Of course, obesity, just the fact that there are higher levels of adipose tissue or higher levels of fat cells in your body, that's going to automatically raise your level of inflammation or your state of inflammation. We've also got your foods that are going to be high carbs, high processed, or lots of processed foods, high sugar, polyunsaturated vegetable oils, trans fats. Those kinds of things are going to create this heightened state of inflammation. You've got your allergens or your sensitivities. So some people are sensitive to casein and cheese. We've got gluten, you've got trans fats. And then there's these environmental ones. We kind of touched on a little bit with the pesticides, but you've also got your cleaning products, your bug sprays, all that kind of stuff. Your air quality, make sure that you change your filters in your home. And then stress increases the release of cortisol by increasing insulin. So you want to be very careful about your emotional stress levels. And then hormones, that's a big part of it too. Changing levels of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone They all have a big role in playing in age-related inflammation. Want to make sure that they stay balanced and they're at levels that are appropriate for what you need to function accurately. We still don't understand all the connections, but it appears that a decrease in estrogen corresponds with a rise in cytokines and interleukin 1 and interleukin 6. And this changes the rate at which new bone is formed, which could be a leading indicator to osteoporosis. So, ladies, that's something to think about. If you're starting to show signs of a little bit of osteopenia, which is typically what the doctors will tell you about initially, something to consider is not only taking calcium and vitamin D and eating lots of dark leafy greens, but you may want to take a look at your hormone levels and address that. I'd be happy to help you with that in a natural way. Um, Rather than implementing anything under the skin or injecting your body with any kind of lab made hormones. The hormone support that we have here is whole food, all natural. So, we want to make sure that you're eating a basic anti-inflammatory diet, which is basically what you guys have been doing the past week. So fresh is best, lots of vegetables, full rainbow. You want to make sure you get your omega-3 fatty acids. Whole grains, kind of questionable. You want to think about your sensitivity. So if you're sensitive to gluten, you want to be very careful with that. Corn and wheat, those are two things that need to be pollinated, which means that it is much more likely to create allergies. So you want to be very careful of that. And then, of course, you've got your ginger and curry for your anti-inflammatory effects. It's always good to add that into your dinners whenever you can. Making baby food for my little nephew, I like to throw in a little bit of garlic, just a little bit, just to give him some anti-inflammatory support. It's wonderful for their health. So now let's move on. What can we do with nutrition? So you got your 10-day healthy inflammation program. We can always do that. You don't have to do it with a program like that we're doing now, like a group. You can do it anytime you want to. You just let us know. You can go online and sign up for Patient Direct and order directly through their website. And then we also have omega-3s. Continue taking your omega-3s. We've got, like I mentioned, the cod liver oil is what's included in the healthy aging protocol, that wellness protocol that I would recommend everybody be doing. And then there's the hemp oil complex, which can also help us, like we mentioned before, with those CB1 and CB2 receptors, CB2 in particular, for your thyroid and improving your thymus for improving your immune system that way. You've got your turmeric forte, like we mentioned before, with that fenugreek. It's very much more absorbing that way. And we've got your boswellia complex. So we could take a look at which one you might be better for you specifically. And your PMGs, those are protomorphogens. And I've listed them over to the side here in this little image, individual protomorphogen extracts. And these are all standard process protocols or formulas. And they are specifically meant to support the organ. So you could see cardiotrophin would be for the heart, dermatrophin for your skin, hypothalamus, PMG for your hypothalamus. We've got prostate as well to help with anybody who's had prostate cancer or any issues with their prostate. Pancreatrophin, PMG is wonderful for those that are struggling with diabetes. And so on. And of course, herbs is one thing that we had listed on that last slide there. So let's talk a little bit more about these different herbs. We've got Stephania root extract. We've got stinging nettle leaf. That is definitely something that you will see at the health food store. You may even find it in the tea section at Publix or Winn-Dixie or wherever you may go to get your groceries. But that stinging nettle leaf helps balance out COX and the lipoxygenase pathways, which are the pathways that are part of your pain sensory. We've got holy basil leaf extract. Holy basil is one of my favorite essential oil smells. It's wonderful, but it decreases the release of your lipopolysaccharides, and it helps balance the release of a range of cytokines. So all this is just about balance and inflammation. Your ginger root extract decreases activity levels. Your Indian frankincense gum extracts are more balancing. Your green tea is also balancing in terms of all the different cytokine, your inflammatory cytokine pathways. And then luteolin, that's also going to balance your cytokines, such as that nuclear factor KB that we talked about. So if you've completed the pre-cleanse and body scan, make sure that you schedule your post-cleanse scan. So we're going to be doing them on Friday during lunch. That is between 12:15 and 1:15. We start seeing patients again at 1:30 on Fridays. So if you guys want to get yourself scheduled for that in-body scan, please give us a call. Our phone number is 904-775-8949. And that way we can get you set up for that scan. It'll be a little bit quicker. We'll take a look at your results and compare the two, but we should be able to bust it right out this time since you guys have gone through it already. All right, so of course, talking about the scale, remember there's some non-scale victories. They're just as important. So we want to think about the inches lost. We measured that, so we can take a look at that. If the scale doesn't seem to be showing you much improvement at home, we want to make sure that you're not gaining the muscle and losing the fat to balance each other out. But other things that you can be thinking about are, are you sleeping better? Do you feel like you have more energy throughout the day? Are your clothes feeling looser? Do you feel healthier? Are you getting more compliments? Are people noticing that your skin is a little bit more bright or your hair is a little shinier? And then, of course, better focus. That is huge for me to do this cleanse. I definitely need to improve my focus to be able to stay energized from 6 in the morning until 6 at night. So the scales don't always show your progress, at least not the progress that you can see on a scale. And something else, I thought this was very sweet. It's just a number, really. The scales aren't really telling you what a great person you are and how much your friends and family love you and that you're an amazing person and that you have the power to choose happiness and that you are your own self-worth. So, things to be thinking about post-program. You've worked so hard to eat well the past week and a couple of days coming up here to get to the end, and taking your supplements and increasing your exercise. So from here, it's important that you try to maintain these new things as the new normal. This is a lifestyle. This is not a diet fad or anything like that. This is a lifestyle. So here's some food additions that you can make. On top of what you're currently eating, these grains, you can have some quinoa, some sprouted grains, and wild rice. I'm a big fan of wild rice. Long grains are better for you than the short grains. And you want to limit to 2 to 3 servings per week. Yes, those grains are a little bit more inflammatory promoting. So if you're trying to keep your inflammation down, you do not want to be eating those things as frequently. So treat them as if, it's a little treat to be able to have those kinds of things. And then fruit, 2 to 3 servings per day in shakes or as snacks. You can start to pull them out of your shakes and start eating them as snacks. I highly recommend continuing to have the shakes because that way you're getting wonderful nutrients. You can do it as your breakfast first thing in the morning. Just get out the door, get to work, feel full and satisfied for the morning, and know that you're getting all the nutrients and the protein that you need. Especially ladies, you never get enough protein. And then it's some miscellaneous things that you can start adding in is like cottage cheese, with nice good fat. You can have some imported white cheese. Now I always talk about white cheese. Those white cheeses are going to be better for you than any of the other colored cheeses, and you want them to also be hard. The harder the cheese, the better. And of course, you can start including some honey as a great natural sweetener. Greek yogurt is another great source of protein and fat. And you want to have 1 to 2 servings of these per day. Those things are all going to help fight inflammation in your body. So here are some fats, regular use. I'm a huge fan of fats. I always like to eat at least half an avocado. If I can't get in a whole avocado in a day, especially in the morning, I'll take some supplements to support my thyroid. And then I will wait a little bit, about an hour, and I'll eat a half an avocado, a protein shake, and take the rest of my supplements. So that half of an avocado with the protein, it It really provides a nice filling feeling. So regular use of that avocado, or you can use avocado oil. We use that a lot when we cook. Nut oils like almond, macadamia, walnuts. I'm a big fan of grapeseed oil, although it says to use it more occasionally. I like it because it doesn't have any flavor to it. And it's a very clean, high heat oil that's not going to go rancid when you bring it up to a high temperature. You want to make sure that you pay attention to the oils that you're using and the temperature you're cooking them at because they can become rancid, which is going to create inflammation in your body when you're eating it, oxidative stress, because it's a lot of work for your body to try to break it down. It's not okay. So there's a few of those regular use oils that you can have there. You've got your occasional oils like your sunflower oil, your safflower oil, ghee. I'm a big fan of ghee now, grass-fed butter. And then oils to avoid: canola oil, vegetable oil, trans fats, hydrogenated fats, corn oil, soy oil, margarine. If you have any of these things in your refrigerator or your pantry, please get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Some sleep tips. Sleep tips. This is a big one. So, behavioral things that you can do: prayer, meditation, make sure you're eating a clean diet. It's hard to sleep at night when you wake up in the middle of the night because your body is working so hard to digest alcohol, sugar, which is also alcohol, and proteins. If you eat a very heavy protein meal, especially red meat, at the end of the day before you go to bed, your body's spending all of this energy in the middle of the night to try to break that food down and do what it needs to do with it, whether it's going to store it or it's going to use it to help heal from the day's injuries. It's not doing what it needs to be doing in that time frame, which is just focusing on recovering from the injuries that are sustained throughout the day, repairing the oxidative stresses. So, what we've got here is also some supplements. That Mintran is like a mineral tranquilizer. That's a good one to help you with sleeping. Minchex is also very great to help with emotional imbalances. If you feel like you're frequently about to pop, that's a good one to take. Magnesium is always good to take to support your sleeping, and I highly recommend taking magnesium as a whole rather than taking it, because there's three different pieces of magnesium, three different kinds of magnesium that do different things. Why not just take all three of them? They're all beneficial, and we're using it in a whole food form rather than the synthetic lab or a lab form that's kind of broken all that down. We've got our Cava Forte as well, which is going to help you sleep. It gives you a little sleepy sensation, and valerian complex as well. Valerian root is a great herb to help with sleeping. So we've got exercise. You want to make sure that you keep moving. Here's some great things to do. And if you need any help with that, Dr. James and Coach Laura have opened the space across the hall, Personalized Performance. They're blasting off and getting to be pretty busy here, but there's plenty of space. If you'd like to up your exercise game, it is a great place to start, or to even improve performance if that's something that you're looking to do. So we've got sweeteners, ones to avoid, and ones that are okay in small quantities. Aspartame, saccharin, sucralose, all the ones that are in bags that are made in labs, those are not going to be good for you to use. And then smaller quantities of honey, maple syrup, monk fruit. I love using monk fruit and stevia when I'm baking, although you want to be careful because it's not the same as regular sugar. And then recommended supplementation. We got this general health, the basic fundamentals, up in that top right corner there from Standard Process. That is a great box of supplements to get, because all you do is just grab the little bag that's inside, peel it open, and take your supplements for the day. And that should last you between taking general health, and typically I recommend also the adrenal support one. That lasts you for 2 months. So it's definitely something that would support your body's immune system and the inflammatory response. So other recommended supplementation would be Catalin, which is the basic vitamin, multivitamin, lots of good minerals. It's a great one for everybody to take. And one way that you can, you could always just take 2 a day, one a day, two a day, depending on what you need. But one thing else that you can do is the shake method. So you take your bottle, you shake it out onto your hand, and whatever comes out of the bottle is what you need for that day. It's kind of an interesting thing to play around with and see what you get. So you also can start taking some trace minerals or B12. And one tablet a day would be fine for that. So fish oil, you either got tuna, omega, cod liver oil, or you can get EPA, DHA, and I would take 2 to 4 a day, depending on your age, what other kind of medical histories you have, and then gymnema. Gymnema, if you guys were participating in the blood sugar cleanse, that is a part of that one. And you would take 2 tablets for the blood sugar support. I would recommend taking one in the morning and then one in the afternoon or after around dinner time, just to make sure that you don't get those nighttime sweet cravings. And then you've got your boswellia complex, your turmeric forte, like we mentioned, 2 tablets for inflammation support. The turmeric forte, I would take one in the morning and one at night. If you can spread it out like that and your body receives the turmeric over, a consistent time frame, it's going to be much more beneficial. Then you got your hemp oil complex, and I'd recommend taking 2 pearls for your endocannabinoid support. So energy is usually at its peak during the first part of your day, which means you should be completing habits that inspire or excite you about the day ahead. This is a really important thing that I want you guys to be thinking about. Every time, or maybe even if you could write this down and leave it next to your bed, so when you wake up in the morning, you look at it and you think, I'm going to be in control of how I start my day today. I'm going to mentally be in a state of anti-inflammation. I'm going to own this day. I am, I can, I will, I do, right? So whatever you start your day off with, that's how the rest of the day is going to go. Make sure you focus on things that excite you. And all of this ties into activating the law of attraction. So when you think positive thoughts in the morning, then you're going to draw those positive thoughts to you, or those positive things to you. And as the day goes on, you see them come through. So our next journey begins September 2021. We're going to be doing the Detox Balance Program. This one's 10 days. This one, I think there may be some supplements involved in it, but it is primarily just doing shakes. So if you guys are interested in this program, you can just send me an email. I will get you signed up for it. We may even start setting it up so that you can order your kits online. So you can do it from anywhere in the country or in the world. You can order your kits online from our office, and it'll be delivered to you so that you can be in control of whether or not you want to do it and when you do get your kit, so you can be a little bit more prepared, anything like that. So that's going to start September 27th. And then in January, we're going to do the 21-day purification program again. And this is going to be exciting. Last year, we did this for the first time as the office-wide cleanse program. So I'm hoping this year we can add in a few more challenges, maybe give you guys some awards for completing the challenges and for reaching them. I'm looking forward to planning this one and seeing what we can come up with to be a little bit more creative. But that's going to be in January, so make sure you put it on your calendars. Thank you guys so much for attending tonight. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to send me an email or give the office a call. And I am looking forward to seeing you all at your next scan.